Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't really work on sectarianism anymore, actually. Well, I do, I guess, but I guess that's what I want to say, because this presentation is basically about how my research has developed since I began. So initially, I was really only interested in sectarianism. I thought, oh, well, I'll just try and work out the historical roots of Sunni Shia discord in Iraq, especially following the US invasion in 2003. But I think soon after I began, I realised that probably a more interesting story was to look at, I guess, the ways that Sunnis and Shias have actually kind of sought ways and means to live together in the country and get over their differences, whether it's on a kind of political, theological, who I think is the Ed Kessler or Miriam Wagner of Najaf. He's called Mohammed Hussein Kashif al-Bitta. He was a very clever guy. He was born in 1877, wrote God knows how many books, became a traditional, had a traditional religious education, became a mujtahid. Never quite made it to sort of the most senior position, but was like a real serious scholar. And as well as this, he was also very interested in politics and political affairs. So he lived through a period of pretty incredible political change, which saw the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire, constitutional experiments in Iran and the Ottoman Empire, the First World War, the invasion of Iraq, the formation of Iraq as a pluralistic nation state, and then obviously British colonialism as well. And I think all of this created opportunities, but it also created a lot of challenges. So while I guess state building and all the communications revolutions that went along with this period, so we're talking about print, improved transport and things like that, well, that had the capacity to bring communities together, and I guess allow for the imagination of non-religious, or rather not non-religious but pluralistic senses of identity. It also had the capacity to amplify, I guess, prejudice and negative assertions, especially about Shiism. So from Najaf, this guy in the 1920s became particularly aware of this. He got lots of communications with people living in Egypt, and he also travelled a lot as well. He found out that there were all these outlandish views about Shias. For example, that they had horns in their head and things like that. That's probably one of the more extreme examples. So he. So what did he do to counter these? He basically, along with a lot of like-minded men, also from Najaf, he embarked on an interfaith campaign that was based on dialogue, travel, and publication. So some examples of this: he invited delegations to Najaf to teach them about Shiism, including a famous Egyptian historian called Ahmed Amin, that people might have heard of. And he did all of this. He got them over, and he published an account of his events. He also attended one more slide, I think. The Pan-Islamic Congress in Jerusalem, and this is him at the front. This guy's not so good, but anyway. He led the Friday prayer at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and he published a hell of a lot. He published a book called The Origins and Principles of Shiism, which is essentially Shiism for Dummies, and was translated into English and is still widely circulated today. And all of this sort of activity provoked a lot of dialogue and debate, which often wasn't necessarily all that good. It often was quite discordant and vitriolic, especially when particularly controversial issues were discussed, such as temporary marriage or mutta. But what I think is important for al-Bitta was not to sort of get rid of this dialogue and create some sort of consensus between Sunnis and Shias. But it was actually, what was important to him was that the dialogue was taking place at all, and that accurate knowledge and understanding was getting out there. So his campaign was really as much one against ignorance, I guess, as it was against prejudice. So despite the ambiguous results, what I think al-Bitta and his fellow ecumenical activists show us is that campaigning for these sorts of things, ecumenical campaigning that is, has been a consistent part of I guess, the story of modernity in the Middle East. Although it's been very difficult, discordant, and often pretty unsuccessful, as history will show, regularly morphing into polemic or vitriol, it's been definitely a consistent and persistent story. And looking at this history, I think illustrates, I guess, the salience of interfaith activity in all areas and all contexts. So I realise that this presentation has essentially been an attempt at a historical vindication for the Woolf Institute. Thanks.